This Wellness Coach podcast is brought to you by our brand new Facebook group called the Wellness Coach Tribe. Come join us and chat about any episode at any time. Keep up to date with all our events and connect with a like-minded group of wellness enthusiasts. To join the Wellness Coach Tribe, simply search for the Wellness Coach Tribe on Facebook.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We ask, in what ways can we show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can we mine the wisdom from the experiences of our lives and expand into those challenges? If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs, so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. And if you feel like giving a little back to this free content, please become a patron of the show and receive extra member benefits for less than a coffee a month. Or you can leave a review on iTunes and Facebook, all of which helps the podcast keep going and reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul. Head on over to patreon.com/NTM podcast to find out more. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner, and today's podcast is Baby and Toddler Sleep with sleep consultant Sophie Acott. So soon we'll cut over to a Skype call interview with her, which is full of so many pearls of wisdom when it comes to baby sleep and our own sense of emotional safety and dynamic within that.
Yeah.
So just be aware it is a Skype call. There will be a little bit of drop in and drop out. So please just, hang in there for that. And we would really love to hear, as Sophie would, what you gained out of the podcast. Before we do that, I'd love to remind you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au and on the homepage, sign up to join our tribe so we can shoot you off an email once a fortnight with everything we've put out in the world so you don't miss anything and you can pick and choose where you'd love to dive deeper. So without further ado, let's get into our podcast with Sophie Acott.
So a little bit about Sophie. Sophie is a certified sleep consultant, parenting coach, home birth enthusiast and conscious parenting advocate. After working with families for many years using traditional behavioural methodologies, Sophie recognised that there was something amiss. Existing mainstream cry it out and no cry sleep training techniques lacked sustainability and failed to acknowledge the inextricable link between the parent-child connection and sleep challenges. Not only this, but there were limited methods that could empower parents with the tools and confidence to overcome sleep challenges as their children evolved beyond the baby and toddler years. After being introduced to Parenting by Connection in 2015, Sophie began applying the fundamentals of how children's emotions work and the various parent-child connection tools to her sleep practice, with outstanding results. Sophie maintains that sleep is a biological and emotional process, not a behavioural one. Behavioural sleep issues develop when a child's emotional needs remain unmet, and therefore, if parents desire long-term change to sleep patterns, they must first focus on connection and emotional well-being of parent and child respectively. Having witnessed a profound transformation to her own parenting journey since implementing the Parenting by Connection tools, Sophie is passionate and committed to supporting other families to overcome their own unique parenting challenges, restoring joy, vibrancy, happiness and harmony to the family unit. So welcome, Sophie. It's so nice to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. It's so nice to be with you ladies.
And I guess I want to give our listeners a picture. So we've obviously heard all about you and kind of your background essentially and your view of sleep. And so what I really want to do is set it up so our listeners have a sense of why I called you in such desperation earlier this year.
Tell us your story, Bridge.
Oh my God. Like, I think every child takes you to a new edge with sleep. And I was finding myself in this all-consuming, like, rage response, you know, to where I'm like, this is not healthy anymore. Like, I'm now beyond my own capacity to hold this. And, you know, my daughter's 2.5. I'm thinking, come on, like, why are we going through this period of her waking like 5 to 6 times at night? Why is it taking me over an hour sometimes to get her to sleep? You know, like, and I think anyone who's been at it for that long with a toddler, and you're thinking, come on, like, the end's got to be here. It can be really, it can send you in a downward spiral. And I think that's where I really found myself. And so I'd been following Sophie's work for a long time and always felt that if I'd ever needed help with sleep, I was going to go with Sophie, because your approach is so deeply aligned to my view of sleep, which is it's not a behavioural issue. It is, you know, and likely, you know, a lot of emotional undertones to why sleep isn't happening. And any kind of training I wanted to do, I wanted it to be gentle. So I think I'd saw that you just released your book, and I downloaded that and I was having read, and I'm like, yeah, I need help here. So I was desperately emailed you and said, I'm pregnant. I've got a toddler who doesn't sleep. I'm staring down the barrel of like 2 kids waking up and not knowing how I'm going to deal. So help me.
And having been there myself, I said yes.
Yes, exactly, right, exactly. You get it.
So what I'm fascinated by is then came the setup of the consultation.
Yeah.
Through that was an extensive consultation questionnaire, which Bridget had sort of briefly shared with me. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting. Do you want to go into what you found?
Yeah, the questionnaire was great. And I think it really set up for me what it was going to be that we were going to be looking at and working through. And it had the things I expected. So it had the things about, you know, how dark is the room and what's the bedding like and what are the sort of the existing sleep cues. So that's standard sleep stuff. But then there was also so much deeper questions about, you know, diet and kind of the child's general temperament. There was the really interesting one for me, which required a lot of self-reflection, was whether I identified myself as like a type A or a type B personality, which was fascinating to me because I thought, yeah, like depending on whether we're kind of a go with the flow kind of person and we adapt to situations, or we like things, you know, like type A, like regimented and ordered and we need schedules, that's going to influence how we approach our child's sleep. And so I guess I'd love your insight, I suppose, on why that question matters so much and how the parent's own relationship with their flow, I suppose, impacts how a child fits into or how a child learns to sleep habits.
Yeah, sure. It's one of those questions that I put in there. I think reading the questionnaire before I work with clients, it gives me a good idea of who I'm dealing with. So I know there's people in between, you know, not everyone fits into an A or B category. You know, it's not black and white. But, you know, I guess if you do, you would classify yourself as like an A type. You're right. You know, you like schedules, you like predictability. I find that those parents it's almost like you have to have a different language in working with different types of parents, because they really like to know, this is my question. I want to know, if this happens, what do I do? And if this happens, what do I do? And sort of it needs to be very structured, the way that I have a consultation with them, the language that I use, and also, you know, how we make a plan for that family. They sort of really need to know the nitty gritty of what's happening, like step by step, every detail, and, you know, what if. Whereas I find that type Bs, you know, we can have probably more of a relaxed conversation, not necessarily tied down in, okay, if this happens, what do I do here? It's sort of, okay, they can go with the flow a little bit more. And that's no judgment on either end of, you know, whatever personality type you kind of fit into. But I find that, you know, in my own experience working with parents, is the type A's tend to want to, you know, do the typical kind of sleep training. I would say majority of the people that I work with would be more type B, just on average. But whereas type B, probably a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more likely to want to explore sort of trial and error, which, you know, most of the sleep stuff is. You know, even I've been working with families for like 5 years, you know, pretty intensely. And, you know, there's not sort of just a one-size-fits-all approach. And even knowing what I do, every family is completely different. Every child's completely different. So, you know, you do have to work a plan around that sort of family. And, you know, I can't just say this is the way it is and this is what you have to do, because, you know, everyone has different, you know, parenting styles and different lifestyles. And so, you know, really trying to be flexible and swing in with each family. So, yeah, I'm not quite sure if that kind of answered your question, but it gives me a good idea of the language to use and how I'm going to approach, you know, our time together.
So with the questionnaire, when you're reviewing it, what sort of things or red flags, red herrings are you looking for within that can build a story of where this child's sleep habits have come from?
Sure. And as Bridget was saying, you know, on my questionnaire, it's more than just about the environmental stuff and the routine. That's always good to know, because this can be, you know, why children don't sleep as well as they can. And obviously, yeah, I mean, if they're overtired, if they're not sleeping well during the day, or if their bedtime's too late, or if their room's too light, or perhaps they're, you know, it's too noisy when they're trying to sleep and we're not using white noise. They're all important things. But what I've really become interested about, you know, in the last few years, since I've been doing a lot of the aware parenting stuff and hand-in-hand parenting, is really looking into like the pregnancy experience, the birth experience, because those sort of things, as you guys know, you know, with conscious parenting, that it actually starts at conception, you know. So however mum is feeling when she's pregnant, you know, is there stress? Is there, is she feeling depressed? Is there anything going on during the pregnancy which then could perhaps, you know, impact, you know, making a child sort of like need to kind of, you know, have, I guess, you know, heal from trauma when they're born, to cry more regularly, or have more difficulty falling asleep. Same as the birth experience. You know, was there any trauma there? Which, you know, we say trauma, but a lot of births do have some element of trauma. You know, even sort of straightforward vaginal births can still be traumatic for babies. So really wanting to know, the emotional side of that experience for both mum and baby, because that really sets up the tone for how the child, you know, comes into the world. And you know, I'm sure we'll go on and talk about, you know, the healing power of crying and the aware parenting side of things. But obviously that's a huge part. Emotional well-being is a huge part of children being able to sleep well. And in fact, you know, I'd say that the main reason that children don't sleep that well would be due to fear, you know. So whether that's fear of separation or fear of the dark, fear of monsters, fear of being alone, whatever that is, you know, which is an emotional reason. It's not anything else. I mean, other tweaks can be made, but I think it's mostly an emotional and biological process, you know, not a behavioural one, as you mentioned before.
And I mean, sleep is an enormous separation, isn't it? It's the biggest separation that babies and children will likely go through in their day, because they're having to let go into an enormous vulnerability to be sleeping, you know, on their own, or even with assistance. It's a big thing.
Well, it's a letting go, isn't it?
It's a letting go, yeah.
And if you are running an anxiety, you're wanting to be in control of that, and being able to surrender and let go is a scary process.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of our listeners would really be tuning into your approach and looking for that more holistic picture of why sleep might not be happening. But I wonder, is that an education process for you with your clients, or are most of them kind of quite you know, well versed in it?
Well, it's interesting, actually. This has been something that I have been feeling for a long time. You know, what I do with my own children, I co-sleep. I've kind of, you know, fallen into feed to sleep patterns with all my children. You know, done everything that I, you know, help my clients overcome, pretty much. That's what I do with my kids. But my sort of philosophy is, if it works for you, then there's no point changing. I'm quite passionate about telling parents where I can help them and where I can't. You know, when parents are writing to me with a 4-month-old with developmentally or biologically normal issues like sleep issues, like they're waking 2 or 3 times overnight and sleeping, relatively well during the day, or even if they're catnapping, yes, I can help you work on some foundations, and I can always help you with the emotional, the connection tools and that sort of thing. But I don't know if I can help, your baby sleep any better than what they're biologically programmed to for that age. It's not realistic to expect a 4 or 6 or even 9-month-old sleep through the night. And it's not what I work with clients to achieve. It's not the sleeping through the night, but it is really setting them up with the tools so they can have a picture of all the things that contribute to, the child not being able to sleep as well as possible. And then they've got tools in their toolbox to be able to help them at any stage. And I guess that was part of my journey as well here, and why I started applying the parenting by connection tools to my work is because when I first started out, I was using a lot of behavioural methods. So I would work with clients if they wanted to do like a cried out approach, or if they wanted no cry, then we'd look at more doing, I guess, sleep lady shuffle or pick up, put down, which you've probably all heard of. And so what I found though, they were great, but they were really reliant. The success of those sort of methods were reliant on the child's temperament.
Yeah. It sounds like it's been, an
age. So, you could be successful at changing sleep patterns. Oh, sorry?
Sorry, no, we're just kind of in and out a little bit with Skype. So do you mind just repeating what you just said?
Okay, yeah, sure. So what I found with these behavioural approaches was that, they were really heavily reliant on temperament and also the age of the child. So what was working for parents, I could help a parent, help their 6-month-old get to sleep. But, next time they went through some regression, what they were using wasn't working anymore because, obviously that technique was only really good for, 6 to 8 months or whatever. And then once they get to the next change or they introduce a new sibling or, anything like that along the road, which is inevitable, they don't have the tools to be able to get back on track. So getting these phone calls and emails saying, what we were doing isn't working anymore, help. And so when I started applying the parenting by connection and those sort of tools, I found that was really a sustainable way for parents to be able to help their children sleep now and pretty much deal with any transition that they come across, because the tools are the same. It's the parent-child connection tools which help children feel safe, which helps them sleep and also helps them behaviourally as well.
So I have 3 ways that I want to go from what you've just said. One is I would love to actually hear what your personal mothering experience has been that has created the knowledge that you have that you now use as a service in this world. Then I would also love to hear from you what normal sleep expectations are developmentally. I think that would be really helpful for everyone to hear. And I would also love you to dive into the emotional side of sleep. So, the healing that you were talking about emotionally through experiences, connection through tears and healing. So there's kind of 3 areas I'd love to go and just let you free for all talk, because I just love to absorb your wisdom.
Yeah, and I think that is, as you know, Julie and I talk a lot about our own voice, I suppose, that drive the work that we do, and to dedicate yourself the way that you do on helping families with sleep. I wonder what's driven that. I'd love to hear more on that.
On your story, yeah.
Yeah, sure. And I think like most professionals, you end up kind of choosing a career because it's something that you've struggled with in your own personal life. I think most people choose careers because of that, or to try and make sense of something that's happened from your childhood or during your life at some stage. And for me, definitely pursuing a career as a sleep consultant and parent coach is because it was so relevant to me. And I think when my second child was born particularly, he had colic, like really bad. So he wouldn't sleep any longer. He'd never want me to put him down. He wouldn't go to anybody else, which I know is normal to an extent, but like he just screamed and screamed all day. Wouldn't sleep for any longer than 20 minutes during the day. And then I was up every hour on the hour overnight, like for a good 5 months. And it was really interesting because, I had a toddler at that stage. She was 2, and I really noticed that I was really struggling to cope during the day, cope with being able to, parent her and, maintain relationships. And I was exhausted. I actually got to the stage where I was just really physically sick as well. So not just tired, but I just wasn't handling it very well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, completely depleted. And, I guess it's the same thing for most parents. That's the hardest thing, isn't it? Especially for the mother, is when you do have a new baby, you've got all these hormones going wild. You've got, recovering from the birth. You're breastfeeding mostly. And then if you don't get sleep on top of that, there's no recovery. And so it's really normal for so many new parents to feel so depleted. And so I think I got through about 5 months. My mum actually just kept on text messaging me, sleep consultant's name. She was just doing research because she thought there was a problem and she just wanted to help. So we ended up getting someone to come out. Actually, I did it over the phone, a sleep consultant. And although back then it was a modified cried out kind of technique, I was so desperate, I would have done anything. And that's why I don't pass any judgment on parents who have been there or will go there with the whole behavioural method. So I don't want to shame or blame parents. It's not my thing and not my intention, because I have been there myself. But, within a week or so, we were all sleeping better, and I just felt so much better than what I had. I was able to recover from being so sick physically. And having obviously been in mothers groups and having a big circle of friends who had babies, you know how big the sleep issue is about getting any. And I just wanted to help people. Having that, I felt like I had this transformation, this life transformation. And if I could feel this way, then everybody else should too. And so that sort of got me on the spiral of I obtained my certification in maternity and child sleep through the International Maternity Institute. And like I said before, started doing the behavioural work with varied success. And I was introduced to hand-in-hand parenting in 2015. Went on to do my instructor certification. And I started applying all of those tools to my work, and just the turnaround in not only sleep, but the emotional well-being and the connection of the family was just something that that was just I never achieved prior to that. Yes, I could get babies to sleep, but like just having reports, having parents, write to me, just, you've changed my parenting experience, and wow, you've changed the way our parents forever, and just, being able to pass on these tools to parents to really be able to connect with their children. And while I was able to obviously strengthen the bond with my children and learn all the things firsthand as a mother was life-changing. So that's sort of the journey, how I got to where I am, and now I still, a lot of aware parenting too, because, Lisa Salter, I know you guys are heavily into aware parenting, so it's very aligned. I think, the same similar philosophies, I think, isn't it, with hand-in-hand parenting. But, in talking about that, do you mind if I jump to the emotional? You wanted to know about the emotional?
No, go, I really do. But I was also, if you don't mind me just interjecting, I was also interested in what, as a practitioner within the hand-in-hand, I was interested in what you see as the philosophical cornerstones of hand-in-hand style of parenting and those of aware parenting, and what you see as yourself moving between them.
Yeah, sure. So my study has been with hand-in-hand, and so a lot of I'm not 100%, obviously I'd love to do it for my certification with aware parenting as well. That's sort of like my next thing. Yeah. But I guess that they're very similar in the way, and I just think there's different terms of or labels, if you like. So I guess aware parenting has attachment play, whereas hand-in-hand parenting, they do like play listening, they do so it's about sort of thing like, and I'm sure that both in like the quality one-on-one time, so special time hand-in-hand calls it, as well as the listening partnerships for parents. So I think they're both aligned in that we need to support parents. What I liked about the aware parenting approach is something that I'm really passionate about is the actual healing from trauma, which I found is more covered in detail with Alita's work as opposed to studies. Like, it's still really both of them are aligned with allowing children to express their emotions while we listen, positive discipline instead of punishment and that sort of thing. But I think where I'm really interested in is the trauma.
Yeah, I would love to hear about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, you know, as I was sort of saying before, that because sleep is generally an emotional and biological process, not a behavioural one, really hard to change sleep patterns long term with like behavioural approaches, and they're sort of anything from no cry to the other end of the spectrum, which is cried out. So, so what I've learned is that, you know, children need to feel safe. If they feel safe and they feel connected to their parents, and look, it's not possible. There's things that happen in daily life that cause us to have some kind of disconnect, or we can't be, you know, constantly connected to our kids. But when they are generally feeling safe and connected, they can sleep as well as what they can. And that's, you know, obviously with all the other things involved, if, you know, if they're ill or if they're teething, or, you know yourself as mothers, how many things are always going on. But I guess if we can cover that thing, we can have them sleeping as well as what they can, you know, all other circumstances covered. So for children, we were talking about birth before, and so if there is birth trauma, the way that children express their feelings or heal from trauma is to cry. And I think in the early days, until they can learn to communicate, and I think once they get to sort of 12 months and beyond, you notice they have tantrums and that sort of thing, as a way of kind of trying to offload their stress and tension and communicate, you know, that perhaps they're not happy or they're feeling unsafe. Young children, really their main method of communication is to cry. I think it's very important as parents, and, you know, both, you know, We're Parenting and Parenting by Connection talk about this, you know, before we're going to listen to our children, and, you know, and or allow them that opportunity to heal from stress or trauma or upset by crying, that we're meeting their immediate needs, because we don't want to be listening to our child cry if they're crying because they're hungry, or they're crying because, you know, they're cold. So, you know, it's really important as parents that we're attuned to our babies and really, you know, knowing where they're at and what their needs are, and making sure that we cover those first. But sometimes, you know, and like most of the listeners would be parents, sometimes you've gone through everything. So baby's crying and they've been fed, they've been burped, you know that they're not too hot, you know they're not too cold, they've potentially been not overtired, everything's been fine with routine, and they just, you know, need to cry. Sometimes there's nothing that we can do about it. You know, you can check, and I think that I've done this in my past, like when my children have just kept on crying, I've done everything that I can to try and fix the problem and not stop them from crying. But you do want to soothe. You do want to, if there is a problem, to help them. So, you know, I've taken their bodysuits off, making sure they don't have hair wrapped around their little toes and all those sort of things, you know, like you go through that whole list. But sometimes, if all other things have been met, you know, a big need is for them to release stress through crying. Same as we have stresses throughout the day or upsets, you know, children experience the same things. Even, you know, loud noises can frighten young children, so they might cry to offload that stress, or the sort of the confusion of that loud noise. So, you know, allowing them to have that release without trying to stop them is, you know, how they basically offload all of that tension. And if we don't, then sometimes it sort of manifests in, it has to come out. It's like whatever we eat gets digested and assimilated, and out it comes the other end. Same with emotions. So anything that goes in has to be kind of processed and eliminated or released in order for them to sort of maintain emotional equilibrium as far as their physical equilibrium, if that makes sense.
So when
saying it that way.
Sorry. So when you're working with parents and they're coming to the point of putting their baby down and there's crying that's come out of that actual process of bedtime, how are you factoring that in? What advice are you giving parents in how they're approaching sleep and their child with that sort of pre-bed time?
Sure. I mean, it depends on the age of the baby, and it depends on, you know, like, have all their needs been met, you know, and why are they crying? Why does the parent think that they're crying? And, you know, parents' intuition is strong. You know, like you normally have an inkling or, you know, a gut feel of what's going on. You know, in the case of, if you didn't mind me talking about, you know, your experience, Bridge, was, you know, you've got an older child, and so you know she can communicate. So you know that she's not hungry. You know that, you know, she's not cold, she's not hot. You know, all of those basic needs have been met. You're awesome at putting in all the connections during the day. She's had enough activity. She's eaten enough. So when you do get that resistance at the end of the day, then it's just her saying, you know what, I don't want to go to bed. I don't want to be without you. And that's what she's probably trying to communicate through the crying or the tantrum or the screaming. So knowing that it is an emotional, in that respect, it would be an emotional release, and it would be something that you would sit and support her through and just validate her experience. You know, yeah, I know this is hard, honey. I know you don't want to sleep alone, but I'm here and I'm going to be with you. You know, it's so multi-dimensional because children rely on so many different things. You know, there's so many things that they can rely on. Like it might just be a parent sitting next to them at bedtime, or it might be they rely on the breast to fall asleep. They rely on, you know, a bottle or to be rocked, and there's nothing wrong with any of those. I don't really believe in negative sleep associations as such. But the fact of the matter is that if it's not working for you and it's not sustainable, and you want to change things, then you do have to stop the thing that you're doing that they need to go to sleep. And when you do that, you're going to be met with resistance and you're going to cry. They're going to say, hey, I don't like this. You're not feeding me. I've been used to being fed to sleep for 2 years or, you know, 1 year or whatever it is. So knowing that you're going to come up with that, you know, the crying is completely normal, completely healthy. And, you know, so long as we know. And it's easy to know that if you've fed your child before bed, and then you take them off the breast prematurely to try and, you know, create some sort of space or get them to, you know, to transition to independent sleep. You know that when you stop doing that, the cry isn't because they're hungry, because they've just been fed. And so you can go through all of the other external factors in your head. Are they cold? Are they, you know, but it's pretty obvious with children when they're old enough that when they're crying, to express it and to change. Yeah.
Can I just ask you a couple of basic parenting things? In terms of temperature, I've always struggled to work that out. How do you know if your baby/child is too hot or too cold?
Yeah, you know what? It's one of those things that, like I said before, trial and error. Because, you know, I've got a bedding guide in the book, and I think that, you know, that works the majority of the time. But how many different climates have we got everywhere? And you know, from one day to the next, especially living in Melbourne, I used to live in Melbourne, it was impossible because one day it's 40 degrees. And that very night, it's down to 17.
Yeah.
And so basically, when you put them to bed, they're just in a diaper or a nappy. And then you've got to go in and somehow change them because it drops down to freezing overnight. So, I mean, it can be a very difficult one. I guess, you know, the signs of being too hot. I always recommend for parents to dress, like have bedding and clothing that are, you know, organic or that breathe, you know, cotton, not fleece or synthetic fibres, because what they can do, they don't breathe, and so children can get quite hot. And you'll notice if they're too hot that they'll be hot to the touch. It's probably good, like their ears or their chest or the back of their neck will get quite hot.
Yeah.
And then what happens also if they're in synthetic fibres is they can sweat overnight. Then the reverse happens, they sweat and then they get cold. So I guess, you know, natural fibres, I think it becomes easier the older that they get. You know, from 2 onwards, it's easier to have that maintenance. But when they're younger, I mean, I think it's under 12 months, they can't really regulate their own temperature. So it becomes really difficult to, you know, I normally say if you can maintain the room temperature and then adjust the bedding accordingly, that's a bit easier than, you know, managing what they're wearing. And then, because at least you can sort of sleep them in the same thing if the temperature stays the same.
Yeah, totally. No, it does. Can I just
it's a tricky one to learn.
When you were talking before, you said, you know, as long as children have, you know, ticked off all these things, and one of them was had enough activity. And I was just interested in that. How do you know what enough activity is?
Okay. And it's my sort of thing here would be sort of it's common sense, but we know that doesn't always prevail, right? I just mean that, you know, that they're getting fresh air, that they're getting developmentally appropriate like experiences during the day. So I'm more referring to, the days. And the thing is, once you start thinking about the reason why your child's not sleeping as well as possible, you could think, oh, well, you know what, we've travelled all day today. They've been in the car. They've had no outside play. It's been raining all day. We haven't been outside. Children who are like trying to grasp new developmental skills, so physical skills, need the time and space during the day to practice. So if they're rolling or trying to walk or those or crawling, having that time and space during the day instead of, there are some parents who kind of, and not at any fault of their own, they could have, really busy lives or lots of children, but they rotate them from one apparatus to the next. So you'll find that the child goes from, the high chair into the bouncer, into the baby carrier, then that goes into the car to do drop-off and into the stroller to go for a walk. And then by the time the end of the day rolls around, they haven't really had a lot of physical play. And so what you can see, obviously that plays out in, bedtime. There could be bedtime resistance or, moving around a lot in their cot trying to burn that stagnant energy that they haven't had the chance to during the day, or they wake overnight trying to practice those skills, which you see common anyway at times of developmental milestones with children. But, I think more so developmental activity, but also, just being able to have a run around, as kids need, just to burn some energy. Nothing. Although they do sleep very well after swimming lessons, as every parent can attest.
Yeah,
Something
totally.
about water.
No, I have one other that I wanted to ask there was normal sleep patterns. Are you able to give us just a brief overview of what you consider biologically or developmentally normal sleep patterns at different ages, probably up till 1?
Yeah, sure. And look, there's things that we can do as parents and things that we can't. I think how long is a piece of string is what I say about sleep and about babies. I mean, I have known babies to sleep through the night from 6 weeks old. And, I wish I had one of those. I didn't get one. Other babies, yeah.
Don't we?
You're waiting. Actually, no, that's not going to happen. No more. And you just think, you curse those parents. How does that happen? That's incredible.
Yeah.
That they're in the top 2%, if even 1%. Babies don't sleep. They're biologically wired when they're newborns to wait for feeds, So you can expect that you're going to be feeding every 2 to 3 hours around the clock. And even every 3 hours when they're 4 months, every 4 hours when they're 5 months even is still normal. So it really depends on so many things, like all the factors that can contribute to that question, are they premature? Because premature babies will have more different needs for a lot longer, obviously. And, are they formula fed or are they breastfed? That plays a big part in how often they're fed and how often they will wake overnight. I normally find in my experience that formula-fed babies do sleep better overnight. I know that's a bit of a generalisation, but generally it fills them up a little bit more. And also I think breastfed babies is just the hormones and everything that, and the closeness that they get that they wait for as well, that connection. So it's pretty normal up until, I'd say, to have even one or two feeds up to 12 months. And there's nothing wrong with that if you're happy to do that. I know some parents who just don't, they're not happy to do it. So, I'll tell parents what's normal. I can help them try to help them sleep better, but I won't advise to cut out feeds where it's not developmentally appropriate, or just try and say, it's pretty normal. I think there's a big thing with parents not knowing what's normal, thinking that children should be sleeping through the night from 6 weeks or even 6 months.
Yeah. That's our cultural pressure.
So, there's just so much of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, coming back to
so much. And I think so.
Sorry, yeah. You go. I cut in.
No, you go.
What I was going to say is I just wanted to sort of bring it back around. The other thing that I had written down here as a note when you were speaking was the concept of being overtired. And this comes back to your story, Bridget.
Yeah.
So when Bridget was going through her consultation with you and implementing changes with Sylvie, one of the things that I really picked up on for you was just the surprise of how much you realised you weren't really aware of what her sleep and wake times or needs were, and what the experience of overtired, if you missed that window of getting to bedtime, then she became overtired, and then it was taking an hour or more to get to sleep. And you thought that was just, I have a baby who's hard to get to sleep, versus if I get in before the overtired window, she goes to sleep. And if I miss that window, we're in overtired land.
Yeah, it's another hour plus. This is what I found. I mean, through the process was, I was keeping like detailed sleep logs. Gosh, for probably over 2 months, was every night. Like what time was her nap? How long was it for during the day? What time, we did dinner, bath, bed, like was there any changes to that? And then how long it took her to get to sleep and what the resistance showed up as. Like, so was it tears? Was it asking for water 5 times? Was it trying to get all these toys? Was it crying? What was it looking like? And it was fascinating to see, because she has quite a sensitive nervous system, it meant that if I was missing that window for her, she was just kicking over into next level overtired, hyper energy. And I'd noticed that I really hadn't been attuned to that. And so, and this is what I mean about sleep being a relationship so much between the parent and the child, that there's an attunement that's needed. And when we have those little light bulbs where we get more insight, we can create a much more symbiotic relationship with them around how it can work better for everyone. That was what kind of blew my mind.
Yeah. And I think, it's just the knowledge, right? So if you know that these are the reasons why a child may not sleep, and the main reasons, it's a process of elimination, right? Yeah. So you don't go straight to, if your child's crying and upset, you don't go straight to listening, right? Because they might have a real need that they need to have met. So, but, when you go, okay, overtiredness is a huge factor. And the reason being that if children, and that window too can be so small. And it's also, again, trial and error, because you can't fit all these children into, the specific kind of, routine windows for each age group. Some children are capable of staying awake for far longer, and others can't stay awake for long at all. So, trying to find out what fits for that family and for that child, can be trial and error. But what happens when a child is overtired is that their bodies create cortisol, which is stress hormone, and how that works, that's got a more potent effect on the body than caffeine. And so children, that's where you see them get the second wind, and then it becomes a lot harder for them to go to sleep because, they're sort of either bouncing around off the walls, hyperactive, or they're, seriously hardcore, like resisting crying, tears and tantrums because they're so tired. And yourself, if you've ever had times where you've been stressed and you might be all really exhausted and you think you're going to sleep so well, and the moment you hit the pillow, you're just wide awake, like completely wired, even being so exhausted. It's like that for kids, just being completely wired. So I think if we can know what factors there are, and it's just like the knowledge, like overtired, what's the optimal sleep environment, because obviously your child's not going to sleep. You can do everything else, but if you leave the light on, they're probably not going to go to sleep so well. Same as if they're too cold, and we were talking about this before, but so many children wake between 4 or 5 a.m. because it's the coldest part of the day. So sometimes that's a dead ringer, a giveaway. If you've actioned everything else, but if they're waking at that time, there are certain things that can that are more likely to be contributing to sleep difficulties at that time, which I've kind of tried to include in my book. But, again, how long the piece of string, it seems like it's just, you don't want to get too obsessed with it, of course, and knowing it, but just having that awareness of the things that may be going on and how you can, there's things you can control and things that you can't. So, you did a great job, Bridget.
Oh, thanks. And it's still kind of ongoing, but I think what it's given me such insight into is my beliefs around sleep, my ability to disconnect and stay strong in that in that disconnection and make that safe for my daughter, because I totally recognise
disconnection. What do you mean by that?
In the disconnection at night, right? Like the separation.
Like the separation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, you know, both you and I have a story of like soothing to sleep, right?
Needing to be there. If you're not right there with them, then they'll be damaged.
Yeah. And so I'm having to parent myself through that shift out of that thinking. Because it is so easy to give in to when they want you to just hold their hand, or because it's Sylvie's age and she can ask what she wants. Hold my hand, like just cuddle me, like lay with me. And of course it's delightful, but the reality is I'm not going to be able to do that for much longer.
Because it does ultimately, as much as we don't want to say it, it does form a habit.
It forms a habit, you know, and yes, we love it and it feels so beautiful, but we are creating a habit, and if we don't want to be, and if we either can't or don't want that habit to continue, then we need to extricate ourselves on some level from, you know, that habit, you know, developing or staying put. And so I had to almost create the emotional safety for myself and like the certainty for myself that what the changes that I was making were of great benefit, to be really, to stay true in them. And that's when she shifted, like that, when I could get really centered in that. And perhaps like one of the most pivotal things I think for what I did with Sylvie was, Sophie, when you suggested that we put a baby gate back on her door, so we put, you know, the baby gate that I'd had on my son's room, we put it on, and we had a little kind of a little craft session of her decorating that, and we called it her special door and made it a really positive thing. And that was essentially to create not only a boundary for her so she wasn't walking into our room in the middle of the night every night, but it was also for her to have this sense of this is her safe kind of space, and that this is a container for her, and that I will separate from that container, but she's still safe within it. And so what I gradually did was move from next to her bed to the corner of the room. And so now we have a really like clear, you know, couple of books, talk about her day, have cuddles. Then I say, put on her sound machine, and I say good night. And I'll say, I'll just be on the other side of there reading my book. And so she can see me, you know, kind of on the other side of the gate in the hallway. And every now and again she'll call out, Mom, and just to make sure I'm there. And I'm like, yeah, I'm here. It's rest time now. And she's become really comfortable with that as good night, you know, as her bedtime, which I couldn't have dreamed of like when I'd started this a few months ago, because she was so needing the physical presence and that kind of me right in the room, which I was building such a resentment towards, because I had no end point to it. I had no sense of how long this was going to take, you know, and I'm thinking about all the things I'm not getting to get done. And, you know, so whereas now I really have this sense that she's building her own toolkit to be able to go to sleep by herself, and that I have the spaciousness that I need, which is what we all need as mothers to parent the way we want to parent, is to carve out our own spaciousness and value ourselves enough to do that. I think
that was actually what I was going to say. I witnessed in you was this profound kind of almost like a grounded roar of security to be able to make these changes after you'd had the consult with Sophie. And I wonder what was it that you experienced with Sophie that gave you the safety to say, my child's going to be okay without me? Because that was kind of where that was.
I think it was the first time with her that I'd really got to verbalize where I'd come from, and also sort of still sense there was some of the resistance in the way of just, you know, like closing the door on her or whatever. Like I could never bring myself to do that for everything that I know about, you know, emotional well-being and all that kind of stuff. So, but I still had to sit with, on some level, there's a void here in me in how I was likely sleep trained, that is still playing out in my own children. And so I'm having to sit with that vulnerability or sit with that kind of pain enough to create separation with my child, but not soothe my inner child through the process, which is likely what I've been doing, but by not creating enough of that separation, but also not disown that inner child by creating like, you know, a huge barrier. So it's that dance. And I think by being able to verbalize it all with Sophie and her kind of look at the nuances within where I'd come from and have a plan for, okay, like, let's try this for this many days and keep a record of how that goes, and just to have that structure around it that yes, maybe I could have done on my own, but
it's like coaching and mentoring.
It's
the safety to do that.
Totally. And I think it was just having that container with Sophie around, like, checking in and what do you think about this? And wow, I noticed like if she has an hour nap after 1 o'clock, there's no way she'll be asleep before 8. Like, just kind of getting a sense of that, the kind of mechanics of it, as well as what I was having to journey in myself to show up and value the work that I was doing with her.
Mm. I wonder, Sophie, what your experience of helping Bridget was, and if that was kind of for you a kind of, I don't want to say ordinary, but a common experience with your clients. Is what you saw in Bridget a common experience with what you see in the general community that you serve?
Yeah, it is. It is. So, I mean, you do see the most common things. Obviously, personalities change and, you're dealing with a different family and family dynamic and other stuff, but the sleep problems are the same. And the biggest thing that I help parents to work with, obviously, or to improve is to get themselves away from, to help encourage their children to sleep without them doing something to get them to sleep, if that makes sense. So, Bridge, when you're talking about ideal clients, I mean, you're my ideal client. And I say that because when you have all that background about children and emotions and aware parenting, so I didn't have to spend, the majority of our consultation, which I do with new parents who are new to looking at these sort of philosophies. I didn't have to go through all of that. So all of our time was really in strategy and, really trying to focus on, what's going on, what do you want to do, what feels right, what don't you want to do, where do you want to be, and that sort of thing, rather than giving the whole background, talking about why children cry and how we can support them and all the tools that we do during the day. Obviously, we talked about that, but Bridge already does it, obviously in their daily life with her kids. So it wasn't a huge, although yes, it was a huge change for you, but it was a huge change for you probably in other areas that it's not for parents. It was more, I guess, that and understanding within yourself and your relationship, rather than actually overhauling your whole parenting strategy, which, some parents do. It can be really confronting, I think, especially, I know the word attachment parent can mean so many things, because, yes, aware parenting and parenting by connection is classified as attachment parenting. But then there's the other side of attachment parenting too that says we should keep our babies close at all costs. I don't think that's where the roots of it actually, came from, but it's turned into that almost, I think. So today's society, attachment parenting is that you co-sleep, you baby wear, you feed on demand, and all of those sort of things, which is really interesting. So working with those sort of parents, it can be a really confronting process of what I should stop my child from crying here, and having that separation when they've done the opposite for so long. So, sorry, that was a really long-winded answer to the question, but yeah, what I found, like with Bridge, it was great to work with you, having that background already, so we could really explore strategies and stuff in our time. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was really pivotal, that the fact that I had a real level of comfort in her expression and crying being safe and not something to stop was it's kind of 9/10 of it around sleep, but there is still such a process, and having the strategy was number one for me. And then like journeying the relationship stuff, like getting frustrated with my husband because he wouldn't be on board as much as I wanted him to be on board for what we were doing, and navigating what that looked like. And
what advice do you have for parents who have different ways of approaching children, parenting and sleep?
So where there's two parents with different views.
Yeah, it can be difficult. And so that's why I don't sort of say this, there's not just one way. And I guess, whilst my opinion is that, allowing children to have their emotional release and listening to them at sleep time while we're trying to remove our intervention, while that's where I see the greatest transformation and change in sleep patterns, and actually quite quickly as well. It's sometimes, if parents can be committed to listening through the process with their children, it can be as soon as, a few nights. I've seen it happen, and I've experienced that with my own children when we've been kind of trying to break what you call control patterns, right? But when you've got, you need the support to do that. And so it's very, I mean, I think for any parent, it doesn't matter how versed you are in conscious parenting and these philosophies, there's still an element that we're being conditioned to not want our children to cry, to want to stop the crying. It makes us feel uncomfortable. A lot of us weren't allowed to cry as babies, or, we always sort of, I mean, you only have to see your parents and their parents and the way that they are around perhaps your children, like, oh, don't cry, honey, don't cry. Everyone's like, don't cry. And in goes the dummy. We rock our babies. We put them in the car. We'll do pretty much anything to stop the crying, right? So when you've got one parent who's on board with that and another parent who's not, or, I deal with some parents who, dad's not around. And so, how can you listen? It's so labour intensive to listen to your child if you don't have the support. How do we possibly listen and, have our cup overflowing to give to our children emotionally and support them through these changes in their lives if we're not listened to or we don't have that support behind us? So that's probably the biggest challenge in my job, I would say, is dealing with those sort of things. And so in cases where, there's parenting philosophies that aren't aligned, one parent wants to do something, the other parent the other way, or mum just doesn't have the support, or dad doesn't have the support, whatever it is, we kind of just work around it. What are they capable of doing? Yes, like allowing them to cry, and the emotional release is so important. Perhaps you just listen for 5 minutes instead of an hour or 20 or whatever. Maybe just 5 minutes at a time. What can you do? Can you do the connection tools during the day? Can you listen during the day when your child has a tantrum instead of, going to distract them or, put them on the breast or whatever we do to try and stop our children from having tantrums? Can you listen if you can't do it overnight? So just trying to really work in with what is possible because it's different for everyone and you've got to really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything that you'd like to say or add before we move into our rapid fire questions?
Is there anything, sorry,
you'd like to add? So maybe
anything left unsaid that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think your rapid questions are pretty good. So we can probably go there because I think the rest that I wanted to cover is in that. So, let's go. We'll go straight into them. Yeah.
So what is the book that has been most influential to you? So maybe it's a book that you gift the most to others. Maybe it's a book that if you could give it to free for every woman in the world, it would be this book. So what is that book or books for you?
Okay, so I'm going to sound really geeky now, but the book that changed my life, and this is, don't forget, this was how many years ago? I don't even want to think, like over 10 years ago, right? The Secret, right? I just remember that was like, that sent me down a rabbit hole of like, holy,
You can
like
swear,
what?
it's okay.
I actually had, holy fuck.
That's our first fuck for the episode.
All over my freaking mind.
Yeah.
Like that was completely, and I know it sounds so funny because it's so old now and it's like it's become so commercialized and everything, but like that was completely and utterly life-changing for me. And I think that was a shift for everything. It was a shift for everything in me creating everything that I have now. So I found that even though I probably wouldn't gift that book now, it was probably a game changer. And then, obviously books like The Power of Now was awesome. Like anything from Acott, like he's just incredible. That was really, pardon the pun, but powerful as far as, like you've only got now. And so, especially with parenting, and I find that so much of our, the way that we get triggered by our children is because we're not in the present, right? We're either, back into our childhood and whatever our child's doing in the moment, triggering, our old memories, but we're either in the future and getting anxious about perhaps, if we don't set punishments, our kids are going to turn into little assholes. So fear of, not setting boundaries, not punishing because they're going to turn into entitled assholes, or we're kind of, shit scared from what's happened in our past that, we kind of flip out and lose it. And then, obviously, it goes south from there. So like that was, I think, instrumental in, and then, there's, how many do you want to talk about? Lisa Salter's books, like The Aware Baby. That's probably a really good place to start for any parent. I've tried to that's a really good one for learning just from birth, what babies need and, how they heal and the importance of crying, why children cry, how we can support them. I thought it was a really good newborn kind of book, and I wish I had have read that a lot earlier. So that would be probably one that I would gift to new parents. And Listen by Patty Whitsley's also a really good one as well. I just released that a few years ago. That, just goes through certain things and, common issues, like whether it's sleep or behavioural stuff, if it's aggression or biting or children not wanting to share, and shares the tools and what you can do in each kind of scenario. So that's really useful. And there's another 50 that's on my bedside that with 4 children I'm never going to get a chance to read. So I just have to flick through pages or try and download on my phone and try and read the snippets while I'm breastfeeding the baby. Yeah.
Next one is, can you recall an immense challenge in your life from which you have gained enormous insight or wisdom? And walk us through what the aftermath and the learnings have been for you.
Yeah, this is a good one. So I would have to say the biggest challenge, and I know that parents have had so many, but would have been probably picking up. And I used to live on the peninsula in the Mornington Peninsula in Victoria, Australia. And I moved with our family to San Diego 2.5 years ago. Fell pregnant 3 months after moving here. And that was like a bombshell because obviously first time of being away from family and my really close friends, didn't really know anyone here. And all of a sudden you've got a fourth baby on the way. And yeah, I won't lie, I cried a lot. And what it really, that the whole process actually, it made me realise how important it is to have support and, setting up, support networks and friendships. And, I studied the hand, so I established a group of mums at my son's preschool to do listening partnerships and everything like that. And support everything. I had a pattern actually, and one of your good old friends that kept on popping up. It was I'm not worthy, or I'm not good enough, and I know that I'm not the only one that has that sort of pattern. But it was a really interesting one because in having that pattern, I would never want to ask for help. I wouldn't want to see it. I would feel like I was weak, or I feel like I was bothering people. I wouldn't say yes a lot, so people would offer to help me and I'd say no just because I felt bad, or I was worried that I wouldn't be able to return the favour, all those sort of things. And I did some serious work on that when I was pregnant because I knew I had to. My family wasn't here. And to bring another child into the world and also parent the way I wanted to with my other 3 children being away, separated by such a distance from my family. I had to say yes. I had to say yes to play dates. I had to say yes to please bring over food. Please pick up my children from school. Please just listen to me as I cry. And that was life-changing, actually. I do remember that period of just being able to heal that, even if there's still more there, but healing that kind of pattern has been huge.
Can I ask, Sophie, how you did that? Because what I hear, I do a lot of women's work, and what I hear from a lot of women is how insecure or intimidated they feel to create deep, rich relationships with the women that are in their community that they might otherwise judge, like, let's say, school mums who are, not necessarily their peeps, or they know don't share the same philosophical underpinnings. And yet you've stepped beyond that to transform those relationships into the camaraderie of women and through the common journey of listening partnerships and motherhood. How did you do that, being a foreigner in a place with no roots, no connections? How did you actually do that?
Well, my son goes to an organic preschool, if you will, and so they're my kind of people. Already I sort of knew, and that's why we chose the place. But the lady who runs it, she's just amazing, and all the parents were very much aligned. In the sort of, I guess, natural parenting you'd call it. I actually, because I was doing my hand-in-hand certification, so what I did is I ran a workshop, a 6-week workshop. And I didn't really know them that well, but I said, look, I'm running this Parenting by Connection workshop. if 6 of you want to come, and it's a 6-week course, etc. So, I had 6 of them come along, and I ran the 6-week class, and we became really close because obviously, you're sharing your most personal details about, your family, and, obviously you have to have a trusted space. It's very much, setting up that environment that it is safe and nurturing, and everyone feels that they can share, what's going on, and to get to learn about these women like so intimately. And when you didn't know them that well, like, it really bonded us. And so, they're kind of, we do, it was kind of weekly, but after having children and things like that, it's like more like a fortnightly circle now. But we still have listening, so it's been like 2 years now. And, those lovely women, it's so funny how you can make such strong relationships after a year. They held a beautiful, baby shower for me where they, did all this, chanting and wishes. And it was the most beautiful experience. Like, this brought me to tears. And it was really to have these sort of, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough stuff, from my childhood, still there. But they were they were instrumental in helping me overcome that through our listening time and that sort of thing. And obviously, still parenting your 4-year-old child in there, right? Learning that there's still sort of a lot of nurturing that perhaps, that we missed out on, and being aware of that, that inner child, and being able to, I guess, reparent, right, the way that you want to yourself, and then you can, heal and be able to be the parent you want to actually your children. So, it's pretty deep, but it's been amazing, because I can actually say yes now. Hopefully, if someone asks me if I know it sounds so silly, but
no, it's because you created the safety.
And yeah. But even with people I don't know, people say, "Would you like this?" I always said no. I didn't want to put people out, and so I've got a yes person now. Yes. So I've changed.
So our final
the importance of being partner.
Yes, that everyone
absolutely.
does. Yes.
Yeah.
So our final question is: if you could have a billboard on any major highway in the world, what would it say?
This is a good question. Actually, it got me thinking, and I'm not quite sure if it would look that good on the billboard, but I'd probably do something like "You do you," right? Like, and I love that because I don't know. I think that in this day and age, there's just so much shaming and blaming of parents for opposing, parenting styles. Like, it's none of your business, right? You do you. Concentrate on you and your family, and whatever, Mary down the road is doing with her children is completely up to her. If it's not affecting you, then it's not really worth commenting on, right? And you do you as far as, like, your baby best. If you're happy to, and this is where I have to, it's almost like a disclaimer. Yes, I'm a sleep consultant. Yes, I talk about improving sleep patterns, but only for people who want to create change, only for people who aren't happy where they are. Like, I would never tell a mother to stop feeding or that she should night wean her child at any age. It's up to you. If you're happy, just keep doing it. If you're happy feeding your 2-year-old asleep and feeding them 3 times or 4 times overnight, then you don't need me. You don't need any help. But being able to tune into that, and if you're happy doing it, and genuinely not thinking about what you should do or what others are saying you should do, but what you want to do and what is right for you, your family and your baby, then do that. You should worry about the judgment of anybody else. And I think we all just need to be, as parents, more understanding, more accepting of other parents. And, like, that's the same sort of thing with cried out. I don't believe in it, and I don't do it with, my children. I know I said that I did with my second, but, like, I don't do that anymore, and I don't do that in my work. But if that's what you need, I've known people who have done cried out, and it's literally been the thing that saved their marriage. Like, do I tell that parent that, you should have done that, and that, their child is going to be damaged or something? Like, you just don't. So you don't know everybody's individual circumstances. We've all got different things going on and different levels of support and bandwidth. So, you do you, let others do the same, and I think that would make us a much happier, harmonious world, really.
I think that's beautiful.
I love that. It's a beautiful one to end on.
So, Sophie, we have used so much of your time up. We're so grateful that you have spent the time with us. And I know, well, I've witnessed, not experienced, but witnessed what a profound change your impact on Bridget has been.
Yeah, it's been amazing. So thank you again, Sophie.
Thanks to work with you.
Are you able to give us a wrap-up of where our listeners can find you and connect with you?
Sure. So I'm on Facebook, which is just Sleep Play Love Co. Same with Instagram. You can always shoot me an email if you wanted to. It's sophie@sleepplayLove.co. I've got my book on Amazon. I'm giving you guys the link there, but it's called Sleep Play Love, so name of my business. And my website is www.sleepplayLove.co. So that's given you a few different avenues and whatever works for you. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you if obviously what you're doing isn't working and you want to create some change long term.
Thank you so much, Sophie. We're so grateful.
Thank you. Thanks for everything that you do, guys, too. Like, you're amazing. And so, keep up the great work, everything you're doing for mothers and parents and families and babies everywhere. I love it.
Thank you. Wow, there's so much there, wasn't there?
There was lots.
Yeah, and I really am so grateful for, just that being heard and having someone else to be able to give me some strategies, give me some tools. And
give you the safety to follow it.
The safety, because we can read every book, but there is something so profound about having direct support like what I got.
Well, the thing is, you doing it on your own, you can only get so far because you're still in your own head, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when you have a coach to move through something, they're really able to say, hang on a minute, you're holding back here.
Yeah.
This is not in alignment here. What's going on there? And they actually allow you the space to evolve beyond where your belief systems have got you.
Totally. And it's like the work that we do, but doing this on a sleep, just one-on-one on sleep with someone who just knew sleep inside out, it was just amazing. And I really hope that people can see and feel the change that I've got from it, because it's definitely deepened my connection with my daughter through it. And it's put me back in the driver's seat more around the flow in the evenings of my family and my ability to show up the way that I want to show up in the day, because I've valued myself enough to see this as important to create change in, because it wasn't working, and particularly, like staring down the barrel of another baby in the home and really needing to know what I need to be able to give out. Was fundamental, and that's what I took into that work with Sophie, and that's what I've got out of it is that really, really nice boundaries now where everybody feels good. And yes, there'll be hiccups, and yes, Sylvie still wakes occasionally in the night, but I don't get triggered like I was getting triggered. It's very much.
And you're not in the depletion.
Not in the depletion
phase.
Yeah.
Which makes such a difference.
And it was just so hard to make sense of when you're in that. Like as Sophie, her own experience was, she was physically depleted. It's so hard to get anything going in your life when you're in that space.
Sleep is actually, as much as we don't want to own it, is fundamental to our well-being.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when you're a parent, your children's sleep, therefore, is fundamental to everybody's well-being.
Yeah. And whether that's making them sleep better or whether that's adjusting your own expectations of sleep, because there is so much out there, particularly for new parents, on getting sleep right. Yeah. It's nice to have this conversation about what is normal.
So we really hope that you connect with Sophie, and please do reach out to her and let her know that you listen to the podcast and you found this part really amazing or it hit home for you. And please let us know at nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Facebook and Instagram. We love those conversations.
We do.
And it certainly fuels us to continue to podcast and interview amazing women who are doing amazing work in the world.
Totally. So to connect with you, Jules,
is thepleasurenutritionist.com, and you, Bridge,
is suburbansandcastles.com. Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey. And if you want to support Nourishing the Mother and all the late nights, the early mornings, the blood, sweat and tears we pour into our art, then please go to patreon.com/NTM podcast and become our patron. As a patron, you're helping all of the cost of operating this podcast, the hosting, the editing, the transcription, helping all of that be completely covered, and joining a community who are all about honouring our journeys and continuing to open. The more support we have, the longer we can last. So become a patron. We'd love to have you. go to patreon.com/NTM podcast. We literally couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
We hope you enjoyed this Wellness Couch podcast. Did you know we've launched a brand new Facebook group where you can chat about any podcast you like with a tribe of like-minded people? The group is called the Wellness Couch Tribe, and it's an inspirational digital meeting place to connect you to like-minded wellness lovers just like you. To locate it and come join us, simply search for the Wellness Couch Tribe wherever you enjoy Facebook.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.